The first light of dawn spread like liquid gold over Meadowbrook Ranch in the misty hollows of rural Tennessee, casting haunting shadows across the dew-soaked pastures as Dr. Michael Harrison trudged toward the isolation pen, every step heavy with dread. The air was cool, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and the distant, lonely cries of crows. Inside the pen, Brian, a magnificent, hulking 2,400-pound Angus bull who once radiated vitality, stood like a dark statue in the far corner, his head drooping low, his massive shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world pressed upon him. For 5 endless days he had neither eaten nor drunk a drop of water. His proud, muscular frame had begun to wither before the eyes of the men who once boasted of his unmatched strength. His glossy black coat dulled, his ribs now faintly visible beneath the hide he once wore like armor. The wind whistled mournfully through the wooden slats of the pen, carrying with it a sense of finality that made the ranch hands exchange worried glances, their whispers trembling with unspoken fears. The bull is dying and no one knows why. Dr. Harrison set down a bucket brimming with sweet golden grain, the finest feed the ranch could offer. "Come on, boy," he pleaded softly, his voice cracking in the quiet morning. "You've got to eat something." But Brian remained unmoved, as lifeless as the weathered posts surrounding him. Just beyond the pen, ranch owner Robert Meadows paced, his boots scuffing the dry earth, every line in his sun-worn face etched deeper with worry. "Doc," he rasped, voice thick with disbelief. "I've worked cattle all my life, but I've never seen anything like this. A week ago, he was strong, hungry, full of fire. Now it's like he's given up." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Brian's ragged, shallow breaths, each one sounding like a clock tick counting down to something terrible. Have you ever felt the silence of an animal that speaks louder than words, a silence that pierces the soul and tells you that life itself is slipping away? Inside the sterile barn office, charts and x-rays cluttered Dr. Harrison's desk, evidence of the countless tests he had run in his desperate search for answers. Blood panels came back pristine. Scans revealed no hint of injury or disease. Every vital organ beat and functioned like a well-oiled machine. Yet each test result only deepened the mystery, a perfectly healthy bull wasting away, as if he had simply decided that life was no longer worth living. "It doesn't make sense," Dr. Harrison muttered to himself, flipping through pages of notes. "Animals don't just choose to die, do they?" Meanwhile, outside, the ranch hands tried everything they could think of. Tommy Rodriguez, the seasoned head cowboy with hands calloused by decades of work, knelt by Brian's side, offering slices of crisp apples that used to send the bull into a playful frenzy. Sarah Mitchell, the ranch's quiet, observant animal behaviorist, spent hours perched on a stool near the pen, scribbling notes on every twitch, every sigh, searching desperately for the missing clue. "He stopped eating on Tuesday afternoon," she reported, voice low and pained. But he was fine that morning. The change was instant. Like a switch had flipped. Her eyes flickered with a truth she hadn't spoken aloud. Tuesday was the day they had separated Brian from Rosie, the gentle Holstein cow who had grazed at his side for 3 years. Rosie had been sold to a dairy farm 2 counties away. A transaction so routine no one imagined it would shatter a bull's world. After all, Brian was a prize stud, expected to adjust without fuss to new pastures, new cows. But Rosie wasn't just another cow. From the day she arrived, she had chosen Brian as her protector, her friend, leaning into his massive shoulder. During thunderstorms, curling beside him on cool nights, sharing silent moments that even the ranch's oldest hands found oddly beautiful. When Rosie left, something inside Brian left with her, a hollow echo that now threatened to swallow him whole. Is love only for humans, or does it live in the beating hearts of creatures who can't speak our words but feel our pain more deeply than we dare to imagine? Just as the ranch seemed ready to give up hope, a small yellow school bus rattled down the gravel road, sunlight glinting off its scratched windows. It was Wednesday, therapy day, when the local school's special education class visited the ranch to interact with animals and learn about the gentle, grounding rhythms of farm life. A ripple of joy usually swept the ranch when the children arrived, but today a blanket of unease hung heavy over the morning air. Among the students stepping gingerly off the bus was 10-year-old Emma Chun, a tiny girl with obsidian hair pulled into twin braids and a white cane tapping lightly before her. Born blind, Emma had spent her life navigating a dark world. Yet those who knew her said she saw deeper than anyone with perfect vision. Her teachers marveled at the way animals responded to her, how nervous ponies calmed under her hand, how dogs stopped barking the moment she whispered their names. As the children gathered near the petting zoo, Maria Santos, the ranch's education coordinator, approached Robert. "Should we keep the kids away from Brian's pen?" she asked, eyes flicking toward the silent bull. Robert hesitated, eyes clouded with sadness. "Yeah," he said hoarsely. "That bull's got a storm raging inside him. I don't want the kids caught in it." But as the group moved past Brian's pen, Emma stopped dead in her tracks, head tilted slightly as if listening to a song only she could hear. Her brows knitted together in an expression of profound sorrow. "There's something very sad here," she whispered, voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "Something is hurting, and it doesn't know how to ask for help. Sometimes it takes the heart of a child to hear the cries we've forgotten how to listen for, to remind us that compassion knows no boundaries of species or sight." Mrs. Peterson, Emma's patient teacher, gently took the girl's hand, trying to guide her away. But Emma's face was pale, her lips pressed into a line of quiet determination. Each time they tried to pull her attention back to the goats and chickens, her head snapped toward Brian's pen as if drawn by an invisible thread. Dr. Harrison, watching from across the yard, felt a strange chill ripple through him. "What did she just say?" he asked Maria, unable to tear his gaze from the bull. Maria's voice trembled with emotion as she repeated Emma's words. "She said something is hurting and doesn't know how to ask for help." Dr. Harrison stood frozen, the words striking him deeper than any test result could. Could it be true? Could this small, blind girl sense something all his years of training, all his knowledge of medicine had failed to reveal? Around them, the other children giggled as they fed curious goats and stroked soft rabbit fur, their laughter ringing like fragile bells across the ranch. But Emma stood still, face turned toward Brian, her small hands clenched around her cane. "Mrs. Peterson," she said quietly, voice trembling with something halfway between wonder and heartbreak, "that big animal. He feels like he's lost a piece of his heart." And in that moment, as dawn's light broke fully across the Tennessee hills, everyone realized this wasn't just about a sick bull, it was about the unseen ties of love and grief that bind all living creatures, about the power of an innocent heart to reveal the hidden truth we're too busy, too hardened, too blind to see. If this incredible story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps us share more stories of the extraordinary, unbreakable bonds between humans and animals, bonds that remind us we are never truly alone. The air at Meadowbrook Ranch had grown tense as a coiled spring, each hour passing like a silent drumbeat of impending loss. Brian's massive black frame slumped deeper with every sunrise, his refusal to eat stretching into a sixth harrowing day. The once mighty bull now looked like a crumbling monument to despair, his breathing ragged, his eyes hollow. Dr. Harrison, who had devoted his life to understanding the bodies and minds of animals, felt helpless in a way that rattled him to his core. "If he doesn't start eating soon, we're going to lose him," he told Robert, voice low and hoarse with sleepless worry. The ranch owner swallowed hard, his eyes flitting to the skeletal outlines forming beneath Brian's hide. The phrase Dr. Harrison used, "dying of a broken heart," sounded absurd in the open air of a cattle ranch, yet it landed with a truth that made both men shiver. All the science and experience in the world couldn't explain how a 2,400-pound bull could simply give up on life because of something unseen, something felt only in the heart. Meanwhile, the school visit was winding down, the children lining up near the bus as their chatter drifted like a hopeful breeze across the somber ranch. But hope found its own way to Brian when Emma, the quiet 10-year-old girl with dark braids and a white cane, paused near his pen. Mrs. Peterson, she asked, voice so small yet unwavering. Could I please say goodbye to the sad animal? I think he needs to know someone understands he's hurting. Have you ever stood in a moment where the innocence of a child carried more wisdom than the words of every adult in the room, where compassion itself became a bridge between souls? Mrs. Peterson hesitated, her heart torn between fear and faith. The ranch staff had been adamant, no children near the distressed bull. Yet she'd seen Emma's uncanny way with animals too many times to doubt her. She approached Maria Santos, who bit her lip, torn between ranch policy and the growing sense that something extraordinary was unfolding. She can't get close to the pen, Maria said, voice tight with the weight of responsibility. But maybe she could stand at a safe distance, just for a minute. Robert Meadows overheard and shook his head so hard his battered cowboy hat nearly tumbled off. Absolutely not, he barked, every word hard with fear. That bull is unpredictable. I won't risk a child's life. But before the adults' debate could spiral, Dr. Harrison spoke, eyes shining with a desperate hope that outshone his medical doubts. What if we let her try? At a completely safe distance, all of us right there, he said, voice trembling. That bull is dying anyway. If this little girl thinks she can help. The conversation fell silent as Emma stepped forward, her white cane tapping confidently across the dirt. Her head tilted as she spoke in her clear, childlike voice. I won't go near him. I just want to tell him someone knows he's sad, that it's okay to miss someone so much it hurts. The words fell over the adults like a cleansing rain. For a moment, all the charts, tests, and ranch protocols felt meaningless against the quiet truth of a child who saw with her heart instead of her eyes. Sometimes the most powerful healing doesn't come from medicine or science. It comes from a soul unafraid to say, I know how you feel, and you are not alone. How did you know he lost a friend? Robert asked, his voice a strangled whisper of disbelief and wonder. Emma stood quietly, listening to the way Brian shifted his weight in the dirt, the rustle of his breath, the hollow resonance of the empty space around him. He smells like loneliness, she said simply, words falling with the certainty only children can summon, and there's an echo around him. Like when you call out, but no one answers back. He's been calling for someone who isn't there anymore. The adults exchanged glances that carried the dawning realization of a truth more profound than any diagnosis. Emma's words cut through days of confusion, piercing the hardened hearts of men and women who thought they'd seen it all. 5 minutes? Robert said at last, voice heavy with resignation and fragile hope. But she stays 10 feet back and we're all there? Emma's face broke into a small, serene smile. She lifted her cane and stepped forward until she stood exactly 10 feet from the weathered fence, the adults forming a protective semicircle around her. As if drawn by an invisible string, Brian's massive head lifted, the first voluntary movement he had made in days. The quiet rustle of his thick hide, the creak of ancient wooden boards, and the low, rumbling breath of the bull filled the air with an electric tension. Have you ever witnessed a moment so pure, so unexpected, that it made you believe in something greater than yourself? A force that weaves animals and humans together in a tapestry of unseen connection. Hello, big friend, Emma called softly, her voice ringing clear in the morning air, stronger than it had any right to be in her tiny frame. My name is Emma. I can't see you with my eyes, but I can feel how sad your heart is. The adults held their breath as Brian's enormous eyes focused on the small figure speaking with such calm certainty. In the hushed air, each word felt like a beacon cutting through Brian's darkness. For 5 days, humans had approached him with instruments, urgency, and fear. But this was the first time someone spoke to his soul instead of his sickness. Doctor. Harrison blinked rapidly as the bull took one slow, deliberate step toward Emma, his hooves crunching softly in the dirt. He's coming closer, Mrs. Peterson whispered, voice tinged with awe and fear. It's okay, Emma replied, her tone so serene it brought tears to Maria's eyes. He's not dangerous. He's just empty, like when you lose something so important you forget how to be yourself. Emma's words settled on the group like a blanket. warm and comforting, yet heavy with the realization of what they had missed, of how profoundly they had underestimated the bull's heart. Do you believe animals feel love as deeply as we do? Or have we spent too long ignoring the silent heartbreaks happening right in front of us? Emma, Dr. Harrison asked, voice husky with wonder, can you tell us more about what you're sensing? Emma tilted her head again, her expression thoughtful and far away. Brian's breaths grew slower, deeper, calmer, the ragged edge of desperation softening in the presence of the child's quiet understanding. He had someone special, Emma said, voice gentle but unwavering. Someone who made him feel safe and happy, but she's gone now. And he doesn't know why. He thinks if he stops living, she might come back to take care of him. A stillness fell over the ranch, broken only by the distant bleating of goats and the soft clucking of chickens far across the pasture. Each adult present felt the full weight of Emma's words settle in their chests like a stone. Robert's face crumpled with guilt as the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The cow, he whispered hoarsely, eyes misting over. Rosie, we sold her last Tuesday? They'd been together for 3 years. Emma nodded softly, as if the question she had asked Brian was already answered by the deep ache she felt in the air around him. He doesn't understand that selling means Rosie had to go away because of people's decisions, she murmured, each word floating like a prayer into the silent morning. He thinks she left because he wasn't good enough. Or that something that happened to her. Her voice, so calm and sure, made the adults around her shiver with a dawning realization of how blind they had been to the bull's grief. Brian shuffled forward, his massive hooves stirring up little clouds of dust as he moved closer to the fence than he had in days, drawn by this small human who spoke words that cut through the fog of his sorrow. His dark, soulful eyes glistened, with an agony that needed no translation. His enormous head lowered until it almost touched the fence post closest to Emma. Then, from deep in his chest, came a low, mournful bellow, a sound so raw, so filled with loss, it made Maria Santos choke on a sob as she wiped at tears she hadn't realized were spilling down her cheeks. "Oh, sweetie," Emma whispered, her sightless eyes turning damp as her heart seemed to break alongside his. "You really loved her, didn't you, and you think she abandoned you?" Brian's answer was heartbreakingly clear. He pressed his forehead against the fence, the vibration of his pained breathing traveling through the wood, as if trying to reach the one person who finally understood his silent suffering. Have you ever stood close enough to an animal's pain that you felt it echo in your own chest? A grief so pure it made words seem useless? Emma reached into the pocket of her bright yellow raincoat and pulled out something small, simple, and utterly profound, a crisp, sweet apple she had saved from her lunchbox, an offering meant for any animal in need of kindness. She lifted it in her small hand, extending it just beyond the fence, close enough for Brian to catch its scent, but not quite within his reach. The sweet aroma drifted through the morning air like a lifeline. "Brian," she said gently, using his name for the first time with the gravity of someone addressing a dear friend. "I know food doesn't taste good anymore because your heart is hurting too much, but starving yourself won't bring Rosie back. It'll just make you too weak to ever see her again if she comes home." Her voice was steady, but her lip quivered as she spoke. The words, delivered with the earnestness only a child could. Muster hung heavy in the air. Brian's massive nostrils flared, his sides heaving with long, shuddering breaths as the scent of the apple awakened something that had lain dormant since Rosie left. The simple, stubborn will to live. But he didn't reach for it. Instead, he let out another sound, softer this time, almost questioning, almost a whisper from a giant. Emma tilted her head as if listening to words only she could hear. "You wanted to know if eating means you're giving up on her," she said softly. "It doesn't. Staying strong means you're ready if there's ever a chance to see her again. And even if you don't, living well is how you honor the love you shared. Do you believe love is what gives life meaning, even for the voiceless? Or have we underestimated how deeply animals carry bonds we cannot see?" The adults stood frozen, witnessing a moment that defied every rule of logic or medicine. Emma crouched carefully, placing the apple on the dusty ground and nudging it gently with her foot until it rolled just within Brian's reach. "I can't promise she come back," she admitted with heartbreaking honesty, "but I can promise she loved you. And that love doesn't disappear because someone goes away. You carry it with you always." The world seemed to hold its breath as Brian bent his massive head. His lips brushed the apple with surprising gentleness, and when he took it between his teeth, the quiet crunch as he bit into it was the most hopeful sound anyone had heard on the ranch in days. Dr. Harrison wiped at his eyes, his chest tight. With awe, "How is this possible?" he whispered hoarsely to Robert, who was too overwhelmed to answer. The ranch hands exchanged stunned, tearful looks as if witnessing something holy. A 10-year-old child had succeeded where weeks of veterinary expertise had failed, simply by offering understanding instead of diagnosis, compassion instead of fear. Have you ever seen hope reborn in an instant, like a single match lighting up the darkest night? Word of Emma's extraordinary encounter with Brian spread like wildfire. By dawn the next morning, Meadowbrook Ranch's phone was ringing off the hook. Animal behaviorists called from universities hundreds of miles away, wanting to learn what had happened. Local newspapers and TV stations begged for interviews. But Emma remained blissfully unaware of the whirlwind her quiet act of kindness had stirred. When she returned to the ranch the following afternoon, stepping confidently from her family's car with her white cane tapping lightly on the gravel, her first question was simple, direct, and achingly sincere. "Has he been eating?" Dr. Harrison, standing near the gate with his weathered hat in his hands, smiled so widely it looked like it hurt. "He finished the apple you gave him yesterday," he said, voice shaking with emotion. "And this morning, he ate some of his grain. It's not a feast, but it's the first real food he's taken in 6 days." Emma's face lit up, and for an instant it seemed as if the entire ranch brightened with her joy. "He's decided to live," she said quietly, her words carrying a power that left everyone speechless. "Now we just need to help him remember how." Do you think healing starts the moment someone truly sees your pain, when you feel, maybe for the first time, that you're not alone? Over the days that followed, what unfolded was nothing short of a miracle in slow motion. Emma began visiting Brian every morning before school and every afternoon afterward. Her father adjusted his work schedule so he could drive her, understanding his daughter had found a mission larger than herself. Each visit became a quiet ritual. Emma would stand at her safe distance, always careful not to frighten the bull, and talk to him in the soft, honest way one speaks to a friend. "I brought you some carrots today, Brian," she'd say, placing them carefully near the fence. "They're crunchy. My mom says crunchy food is good for your teeth." Brian started responding with a subtle eagerness, shuffling to the fence before she even arrived, his dark eyes scanning the horizon for the small girl who had given him a reason to hope. He began eating more, his ribs gradually fading beneath new muscle. Yet Emma never rushed him, never demanded more than he could give. She simply showed up, every day, and let him know he was still worth caring for. That love didn't leave with Rosie. You know what I think helped him? Emma asked one afternoon, her hand resting on the rough fence post as Brian stood inches away. Their breaths mingling in the warm afternoon air. Emma stood near the weathered fence, her white cane planted firmly in the soft dirt as Brian's massive head loomed only feet away. The morning light painted him in warm, golden tones. The same bull who had once hovered at death's door now radiating a quiet strength that took everyone's breath away. "Nobody else was sad when Rosie left," Emma told Dr. Harrison one afternoon, her voice fragile yet certain, like the first note of a song after a long silence. "Everyone just worried about Brian being sick, but I was sad too. Because losing someone you love is always sad, even if other people think it makes sense." Dr. Harrison, who had spent decades learning how to heal animals, felt humbled by the lesson this small girl offered. Her words were like gentle lightning, illuminating a truth he had overlooked. Sometimes, the body can only heal after the heart has been heard. Day after day, Emma continued her visits, her conversations with Brian weaving an invisible thread of hope between them. She didn't speak like someone treating a patient. She spoke like someone loving a friend. And it was this love, not any injection or test, that drew Brian back from the edge of death. 3 weeks after that first miraculous apple, Emma surprised everyone with a quiet but resolute declaration. Brian's ready for me to come closer. He's not scared anymore. He trusts I won't leave him like Rosie had to. Her words were a soft thunderclap that made ranch hands exchange wary looks. A 2,400-pound bull and a 10-year-old blind girl? It sounded like a recipe for heartbreak. But Dr. David and Lisa Chun, Emma's parents, who had watched every interaction with careful eyes, stepped in. Emma has lived her whole life reading animals through sound, scent, and the subtle ways they move, Dr. Chun explained to Robert Meadows. Her blindness taught her to sense what sighted people miss. If she says Brian's ready, we trust her. Have you ever realized that some hearts can see things no eyes ever could? That true understanding is born in silence, not sight? The compromise came in the form of a small adjoining pen sharing a fence line with Brian's enclosure, a place where Emma could enter safely, close enough to reach through and touch him, yet protected should his excitement turn dangerous. From the moment Emma stepped into the pen, Brian's transformation was undeniable. He moved with a purposeful energy none of the ranch staff had seen since Rosie's departure. His deep, dark eyes glistened with recognition and relief as he approached the fence, each heavy step radiating an eagerness that felt like the first sunrise after a week of storms. "Hello, my friend," Emma whispered, voice quivering with joy as she reached her small hand through the bars. Her fingertips brushed the broad, warm plane of Brian's nose, and his response was immediate, a gentle, almost reverent nuzzle, as if he knew the preciousness of the trust being offered. His massive head lowered, pressing against the fence. Where Emma's hand rested, a gesture of gratitude and acceptance so tender it left everyone watching breathless. "He's bonding with her," Maria Santos gasped, eyes wide with wonder. "Look at him. It's the same way he used to stand with Rosie." But Emma's bond with Brian went beyond the quiet companionship he had shared with his old friend. Where Rosie gave him the steady presence of another being, Emma offered a lifeline of emotional understanding, a reminder that love could outlive loss, that hearts broken by absence could heal through presence. Do you believe an animal can grieve like we do, or have we forgotten how to honor their invisible wounds? One sunny afternoon, as bees droned lazily in the wildflowers bordering the pasture, Emma's voice drifted across the pen with a quiet determination that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Brian," she said, "just because Rosie had to go doesn't mean you can't love new friends. Your heart is big enough for lots of love. Loving someone new doesn't mean you forget the ones you've lost." The words, so simple yet so profound, settled in the morning air like a benediction. Brian let out a soft, low bellow that rumbled through the earth beneath their feet. Then, with heartbreaking gentleness, he pressed his forehead against the fence, holding it there as if anchoring himself to the promise of her words. Dr. Harrison scribbled notes in his journal with shaking hands, but every entry felt hollow in the face of what he was witnessing. This was healing that had nothing to do with medicine. This was healing born of connection, a bond that transcended every chart, every syringe, every textbook. "The bull's vital signs are perfect," he told Robert Meadows, voice low with awe. "But more importantly, his will to live has come back. Sometimes the deepest wounds are invisible, and only compassion has the power to heal them." 6 months after Emma first stepped up to Brian's pen with an apple and a heart full of love, Meadowbrook Ranch had transformed into something extraordinary. News of their unlikely friendship spread far beyond the county lines. Families, therapists, and curious travelers flocked to the ranch, eager to witness the miracle of a blind child and a grieving bull who found healing in each other's presence. Animal-assisted therapy sessions grew to accommodate the dozens who sought the kind of hope Emma and Brian had come to represent. But on one breezy spring afternoon, Emma's visit carried a weight unlike any before. She stood at their usual meeting spot, her fingers curling tightly around the fence as she leaned in, her breath quick with excitement. "Brian," she whispered, voice trembling with joy, "someone very special is coming to see you today." Brian's ears swiveled forward, his entire massive body going rigid with electric anticipation. Over the months, he had come to understand every nuance of Emma's voice, when she was sad, playful, or full of secrets. Today, her tone was alive with a trembling wonder he had never heard before. Dr. Harrison and Robert Meadows stood nearby, hearts pounding as they watched the culmination of months of searching, negotiation, and fragile hope. A rumble of diesel engines drifted across the pasture as a familiar livestock trailer rolled up the ranch driveway, metal gates clanging softly as it came to a stop. Brian's head snapped around, his nostrils flaring, his hooves stamping the ground with an urgency that spoke of memories, flooding back in a rush of scent and sound. Have you ever felt hope so strong it made the air itself vibrate with the promise of what might come next? "Easy, boy," Emma murmured, voice low and steady, even as she felt his excitement pulsing through the earth like a drumbeat. "I know you smell something familiar. I know your heart is beating so fast it sounds like thunder." The trailer doors groaned open, sunlight spilling across the wooden ramp, and then, stepping out with cautious grace, came Rosie, her soft brown eyes scanned the familiar fields, her pink nose flaring as she took in the air of home, her coat gleaming in the afternoon light like a memory come alive. Brian's response was instantaneous and breathtaking. The bull who had learned patience, who had found gentleness, now erupted into a bellow so powerful it seemed to shake the sky itself. He paced the fence line, calling out to Rosie with resonant bellows that carried every note of longing, relief, and uncontainable joy. Rosie answered in kind, her own calls sharp and rising, full of urgency as she trotted toward the pen that had once been her shared sanctuary. Tears streamed down Emma's cheeks as she stood in the middle of this explosion of emotion, her cane forgotten as she tilted her face to the sky, listening to the music of reunion. Around her, the ranch hands wept openly. "The dairy farmer was retiring," Robert explained hoarsely to Emma's parents as they stood by, hands clasped in disbelief. When Dr. Harrison called to explain what had happened here, he said Rosie had never been the same since leaving. He agreed to sell her back, said he'd never seen a cow so heartbroken. Emma took a shuddering breath, her smile radiant through her tears as she reached a trembling hand through the fence. "They're together again," she whispered, voice breaking. Love found its way home. "She missed him too," Emma said wonderingly, her voice catching as the air around Meadowbrook Ranch seemed to still in reverent silence. All this time, she was grieving just like he was. The words hovered in the golden light of morning, and everyone standing near the pen felt something shift inside them, as if the deep, hidden wounds of these two creatures had finally been laid bare for the world to see. When the gates were opened at last, Brian and Rosie stepped toward each other with the slow, deliberate steps of old friends who had once thought they'd never meet again. They paused a few feet apart, heads lowering, eyes locked with a tenderness so raw it left the ranch hands breathless. Then, in a moment that seemed to suspend time itself, they touched noses, a soft, delicate gesture that spoke of relief, forgiveness, and the wordless promise of never letting go again. They stood like that for several long minutes, side by side, two lives entwined in a perfect silence of complete contentment. But just when everyone thought the reunion had reached its peak, Brian surprised them all. He nudged Rosie gently, guiding her with quiet insistence toward the fence where Emma stood waiting, white cane in hand, eyes shining with tears she didn't try to hide. "Have you ever seen love so powerful it made the entire world pause, as if every breath, every heartbeat, waited for a miracle to unfold?" "He wants to introduce you to each other," Emma said with a radiant smile, her voice trembling with awe. She understood Brian's intention instantly, as if his thoughts traveled straight into her heart. "He wants Rosie to meet the friend who helped him survive missing her." Rosie approached the fence with a cautious, gentle curiosity that mirrored the way Brian had first come to Emma months earlier. Her dark eyes, wide and warm, flicked from Emma's face to her outstretched hand, nostrils flaring softly as she took in the scent of the little girl who had helped save the bull she loved. "Hello, Rosie," Emma whispered, extending her hand. Just past the fence, her voice so full of quiet love it made Dr. Harrison's breath catch in his chest. "I'm Emma. Brian told me all about you. How kind you are. How you stayed close to him in every storm. How safe you made him feel when he was afraid." Rosie leaned forward, her pink nose brushing Emma's small fingers with exquisite gentleness, a low, contented sound rumbling in her chest. Brian hovered protectively beside his old friend, his massive body a shield of devotion, his eyes soft and watchful as he supervised the meeting of the two souls who had carried him through his darkest days. It was as if he understood more deeply than words could ever say that his world was now complete because the two beings he loved most had come together. Do you believe that love can multiply when shared? That when hearts open to each other, they don't divide, but grow stronger and more whole? Dr. Harrison, who had seen countless animals recover from wounds and illnesses, stood a few feet back, his stethoscope forgotten around his neck as tears welled in his eyes. "In all my years of veterinary practice," he whispered to Maria Santos, "I've never seen anything like this. Brian has essentially created his own support system. He's kept his bond with Rosie, but he's also preserved his healing relationship with Emma. It's extraordinary." Over the weeks that followed, life at Meadowbrook Ranch settled into a new them, one richer and more joyful than anyone had dared hope. Brian and Rosie returned to their old habits of companionship, grazing side by side beneath the wide Tennessee skies, resting together in the shade of the big oak, sharing the simple, unspoken pleasures of bovine friendship. But Brian's connection with Emma never faded. If anything, it grew stronger. What began as desperate therapy evolved into something more like a celebration. Emma's visits were no longer filled with worry or quiet tears. They became afternoons of shared joy. She would bring crunchy apples and sweet carrots, stories from her school days, and sometimes she would simply sit on the grass, leaning against the fence while Brian and Rosie grazed nearby, her smile as bright as the sun above. Sometimes, healing doesn't mean erasing what hurt you. It means learning to carry that hurt in a way that makes you braver, kinder, and more open to love. You know what Brian taught me? Emma confided to a visiting journalist who came to document their story, her voice as soft as it was certain. He taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting what hurt you. It means learning to carry that hurt in a way that makes you stronger and more loving, not more afraid. The journalist, who had arrived skeptical of the so-called miracle bull, stood stunned, her notepad forgotten as tears pooled in her eyes. In that moment, Brian's story became something bigger than a single ranch, bigger than a single bull or a single blind child. It became a testament to the power of compassion, the unexpected wisdom children sometimes possess, and the truth that the deepest wounds, whether in humans or animals, can only heal when someone truly understands your pain. As the seasons changed, Brian grew stronger, his coat glossy once again, his eyes bright with life. The bond between the bull, the cow, and the little girl remained unbreakable, a living symbol of hope that inspired everyone who came to Meadowbrook Ranch. Visitors left transformed by the story of the bull who had nearly died of loneliness but survived because a blind child dared to see the truth everyone else had missed, that love, when shared freely, could heal even the deepest grief. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's compassion helped you through your darkest time? A time when being truly understood made you believe you could survive anything? This bull refused to eat for 5 days until a blind girl whispered something that changed everything.